Welcome to Psycho-Pass Season 3, Episode 1. Psycho-Pass, series with a bit of a sketchy history. Season 1 may be one of the best cyberpunk anime shows ever to happen. Season 2, not so much. And it seems to be mostly because the first season was so successful that the studio decided to divert their resources to doing a movie. And in some sense, that's kind of how we're getting Season 3 as well. So earlier this year in Japan, the Psycho-Pass people, Production IG, released 3 different Psycho-Pass movies, which are each an hour long. They're called Psycho-Pass Sinners of the System, Case 1, 2, and 3. So far, only the first one, I think, is somewhat available to watch over here. So if you're looking for something to do with Psycho-Pass, that would be the best way to go about it. But as for Psycho-Pass Season 3, it's picked up nowhere for streaming at all. So we're relying entirely on fan subs, and that's pretty much okay as long as you're willing to wait about 4 to 5 days or maybe even a week. And that's how we arrive at Psycho-Pass Season 3, Episode 1, which was supposed to air last Friday, and I'm getting to it on Tuesday. That being said, it has been available for a couple days. This is the only time that I was able to get to it. So, we have no idea what this season is going to be like. All we know that is the writing and the directing is done by the same people who did the first season, but that didn't seem to make much of a difference for Season 2, so we can't really know how that's going to do for Season 3. So without further ado, let's get started with Psycho-Pass Season 3, Episode 1.
罪と共に
Ooh, Akane's back. That was a heck of an opening monologue. Really got me in the Psycho-Pass mood right there. The best thing about Psycho-Pass is that it asks questions about society which are extremely relevant today. We don't really have answers to any of the questions that they're asking. Is it worth it to give up all of our freedom and our privacy in order to have a more peaceful society? We don't really know whether that trade-off is worth it. As we can see in Psycho-Pass, if you give power to the system loves power. It likes to accumulate power more than anything. It's kind of like Sauron in that way, I guess. If Sauron was like a really paternal kind of father figure who said, I'll protect you if you give me everything you have. So Akane asking this at the very first scene of the very first episode does give me reason to hope, but I don't want to get too into this, so let's keep going. So the first thing that I want to note about that opening is it was a really good opening, first of all. I think most of it was done in CG because the animation is so fluid that if it wasn't done in CG, it would actually blow my mind. Second of all, CG seems to be really good at doing things when there's no need to, 1, perspective change, or 2, when there's a really low use of detail, like in silhouette situations, which is what we saw in that opening. Great opening. It's been a bunch of sick openings this season. Another thing I was looking for was the in association with Netflix tag, because a lot of the times Netflix doesn't announce when it picks up a show in Japan, and it just pops up on Netflix one day with no real warning whatsoever. But most of the time, they do, if it's a joint production or if they're paying for some of the production costs, they do show up in the opening credits, as we saw with Beastars, as we saw with Carol and Tuesday. But we didn't see that in another show, which nobody watched, called the Gunjo no Magmel, which is now on Netflix, but was never produced in association with Netflix. So this could still end up on Netflix. There's no way to know until it's fully aired and Netflix decide to pick it up. Or they could pick it up mid-core like they did with Carol and Tuesday. They could show up first 13 episodes and the other 11 or 12 episodes later. That could happen too, we don't really know. But my hopes are right now on this being picked up by Netflix, because otherwise there won't be any way to watch it in North America whatsoever. This is a great example of how to do a good crowd shot. So like, the lighting is CG, the building that they're standing in front of is CG, the floor is CG, and the background is CG, but all the characters are 2D for whatever reason, and it looks amazingly well done. What happened to 2D animated crowds? They always look so much better. So, I went into this with basically no knowledge of what they were going to cover in this season. I think that's like usually the best way to go about doing things. Don't watch trailers or anything, so that way you're completely open to whatever the show has to offer you. That being said, this is clearly a prequel of some kind. I don't know if the whole the show is going to be a prequel, or if it's just like a flashback scene, because we did see Akane in the very opening, and she was writing something, which leads me to believe either she's going to be in the story to some extent, which I don't really want to see, because we see Psycho Pass 1, the very first episode starts with her taking her first day on the job as an inspector. So we have a clear beginning to her story there. I don't really want to muddle it by going before that. Or it's going to like be intercut with things that happened before the first Psycho Pass and things that happened after the second one. I'm fine with that. That being said, I do have a few issues. So the first Psycho Pass came out in like 2012 or something, I think. It's been a long time since then. And since then, we've had a lot of technological developments and like political world developments that the first Psycho Pass didn't address. And we immediately get to that in the very first beginning of this episode. So the opening of the episode starts with a cargo drone crashing in the water. So there was no mention of any like cargo drones in the first Psycho Pass. There were these automated robot police people that kind of like told people with like the mascot faces, but that was as far as the AI went. So since then, drones have obviously become a big deal. So they're kind of implementing this technology even though they haven't mentioned it before. And that's the problem with doing a sequel or doing another part of a show way after when it initially started, because things usually will have changed to some degree, so it's hard to keep the theme internally consistent or the world internally consistent without it feeling completely out of touch with reality. So they've had to adapt it to some degree to make it feel like it's happening in our world, which I'm fine with. And the other part of that is they also have the immigrant thing. So like in 2012 there was no refugee crisis, there was no like Turkey taking in 1 million refugees after the Syrian, civil war thing, and now they do. So before the whole civil system gets revealed and everything, before Akane joins, you have immigrants trying to make their way into this isolationist Japan, which they've said by their own words is the reason why Japan is still the only peaceful country on earth, peaceful quote unquote, of course. So we're going to see what happens when the values of Japan, this Psycho Pass nation, clash with a bunch of immigrants who have no idea what a Psycho Pass is, and if their crime coefficient goes above 200 or whatever, they're going to get dominated. And that's clearly not a good thing. Okay, let's keep going. Yikes. Jesus fuck. I thought they were new immigrants. They're not even new. They live there permanently and they're still being treated weird. Ooh, Japan. So Japan recently, I think people know this already, but Japan is like not the most progressive place in the world, and their government currently is not the most progressive either. That being said, there's also like this extreme far right party in Japan which is gathering strength over the past couple years, which is worrisome if you ever plan to visit there. And with him, he just said, I'm a permanent resident, why are we being treated differently? This would be the equivalent of like someone in the US who's lived there for like 20 years just because they're whatever other race than people like, being rounded up in suspicion for whatever happened. Psycho Pass, dealing with some very interesting stuff here. This is perhaps even more interesting than if they were waiting in line to get in. They also mentioned an immigration quota, which is, I think Japan is making more immigration-tuned stuff these days because there's been an increased awareness of foreigners living in Japan, and the number is not as low as they would like to think that it is, and more people are coming all the time, and they choose to stay there instead of just coming to visit and go back, which has traditionally been the way that foreigners are treated. If you go there, they kind of treat you as a tourist, even if you are living there, even if you do work there. There are many YouTube videos about this on a variety of channels that you can learn about this. But they're like extrapolating that into the future, and they're introducing all these different technologies which may or may not be the most fair. Like, for example, there's this thing, facial recognition is like a big deal nowadays. People are arguing about how it should be used, where it should be used, why it should be used, for what purposes. Should we facial recognize people or profile people with it? Especially since it turns out that a lot of the data sets that they train these algorithms on are primarily fair-skinned people or white people, the majority of the population is in the United States. So if you put a person who's not white through these facial recognition scanners, they're going to give a higher percentage match to a criminal in the system than if you put a white person through it, which in itself is extremely troubling. Couple that with like centuries of racial discrimination in the United States and various other countries. Like, just because you're not the US doesn't mean you have a scot-free history out here. This is what they're hinting at with this whole line thing. Whew, we might actually get a good show this time. Okay. I will say that the 2D animation is very well done. The 3D animation looks like it's out of a PS1 game. Like if you look at this shot right here, the grass is just a matte texture with a little bit of like what do you call like dithering or whatever. I don't know what it's called. But it's clear the bushes are just like plug in place, and this is supposed to be like this epic aerial shot of like the public safety headquarters. I get what they're trying to do. Every single background shot in this entire show so far has been 3D, but I feel like they're like, we shouldn't, just commit to it halfway. We should just commit to it fully, and that'll help it look better. I do agree that committing to it fully does help it, but I still feel you have to do something more detailed than just this if you're going to do this, because if this was a 2D shot, we would have seen like maybe the head of a person walking, like all of the streets are completely empty. There's like 5 cars in one lane, and other than that it's just buildings, and you don't notice that stuff when you just look at it. But if you just see it, it's like a 3-second panning shot. Like if you're going to be paying attention to some part of it, and the city feels dead, like there's no people in it whatsoever, which I don't think was the intention of the shot. I think it's supposed to show like the immense amount of trust that the public has in the public safety force, and that's why their building is so big and they have such aggrandized place in the city, enough to warrant their own city block. That's what the point of the shot is. And by having this like lifeless kind of flat image, especially with this really low resolution fog, it kind of kills it for me. Not gonna lie, I wish they had spent like more time in the 3D or just done it 2D, which that's gonna be, I think, a very common criticism of a lot of stuff we're gonna see. Oh shit. Okay, so it's not a prequel. Okay, I've been wrong this entire time. Tsunemori Akane is now some kind of like journalist type person, I guess, because she was writing something at the beginning. This is clearly a different unit. Okay. Bad boy. Okay, so we're dealing with a different unit in a different place, and show's been transferred over here for whatever reason, but everyone else is pretty much new. The characters are all like your standard Psycho Pass characters. I'm no doubt we're going to learn more about them. I feel like the second season should have also done something like this, like just move to a different part of Japan dealing with slightly different issues. And then you looked at it from like new characters, and then have some other problem that they relate to, deeply. Whew. Okay, but so far, pretty good episode. It's just about to end. We'll talk about it after that. If only real life worked that way. Here, if you do any kind of felony, you get kicked off of your permanent residency, no matter what the felony is. I think it works the same way in the US. If you have a green card and you commit any kind of felony, and surprisingly weird, like kind of gentle things are felonies these days, you lose your permanent residency and you can never come back to the US ever again. So if real life was so forgiving, I would like it a lot. First episode, it's actually double long, so I was wrong. It's not going to end anytime soon. First episode, and we're already getting so many things that the past past seasons didn't deal with. So we had them break into like this random old person's house, and we saw like one of the inspectors, the taller one, he was able to deal with 2 people pretty confidently without really worrying about his own safety. He didn't have to use a dominator or anything. He was able to bring them down with just hand-to-hand combat. And they were very nice to the whole like immigrants who are trying to get their family application soon in the future. So I take back my previous criticism when I said that this show is dealing with stuff that wasn't in the original Psycho Pass, obviously, because it's a sequel. It's allowed to do stuff that wasn't in the previous Psycho Pass. So as technology progresses, it causes new problems. As the world develops, it causes new problems that we have to deal with in a fresh new light. Another couple of things that I want to state in terms of visual influences. So this shot right here, this is very, very like similar to Blade Runner, like wide shot, which they make with those mini models that you could see in either Blade Runner or Blade Runner 2049. There's a bunch of behind the scenes videos about how the Weta Workshop made those mini models about Blade Runner 2049, which I think are really cool. But a lot of the kind of tone, atmosphere, and like pacing of the episode has really, I think, taken inspiration from Blade Runner. Like in Blade Runner, they'd have these long takes with just dialogue, silence in between, pausing, like people reflecting on what the other person has said. That's very Blade Runner-esque. And the themes of Psycho-Pass have always kind of tied in with Blade Runner, but the first season didn't really draw from that well of Blade Runner kind of visual aesthetic and thematic inspiration that we maybe could have if they had thought about it. I don't think that the writer didn't know about Blade Runner. I just think that they wanted to do something different. But clearly here they've chosen to take a slightly different path by incorporating more Blade Runner aesthetic. That's perfectly fine. That's part one. Part two, I really like these two new main characters. So we have like, it's the typical like straight guy versus kind of endearing idiot kind of like pairing duo. So we have the straight guy who just wants to obey all the rules, and he's like the foil for the other guy to play off of, and it brings some like much needed levity to the scene, which is something that Blade Runner does not have at all. There's no levity at all. Everything is super serious. But this is anime, so having some levity, of course, is very welcome. I welcome Arata's, jokes and him sleeping in the car when two like criminals are in there. That's perfectly fine with me. And also, this is why I paused the scene in the first place. We're dealing with homosexuality again, which is like a theme in this year of anime. Like, it's happened multiple times in multiple seasons in multiple shows, and it's happening in a non just passing joke or like one character being like weirdly effeminate, just one for no particular reason that's ever explained. That's like one of the jokes that they play off of in Japanese media a lot. But this year there's been a lot of addressing themes of homosexuality without just like belittling it or just having only one character have any kind of homosexual thoughts or feelings or anything like that. In this season, Hoshiai no Sora, there's a manager who's interested in the captain of the boys tennis club. So, it's everywhere. It's great. We're finally making inroads, and it's just great to see just anything, like also with the immigration thing in Japanese media. Carolyn Tuesday had things addressing themes of immigration. Psycho-Pass obviously has to, with the way that the world has been going the past 4 or 5 years. So it's good to see them tackling new issues, because new issues means a new show, which is not something that we got with season 2. So far, season 3 has been, moving me quite a bit. There's no way this is not inspired by Hannibal. So the main character of Hannibal, Will, has a similar ability where he's able to like feel what serial killers feel when they go into a crime scene. Hannibal, I think all of Hannibal aired between the first season and this season. So there's no way this is not like at least related in a little bit, because it's too similar. Like even his ability is called extreme empathy. Yo, okay, so this is something that I've wondered about since the first Psycho-Pass. The first Psycho-Pass dealt exclusively with blue-collar crime, which is like murders, assaults, like aggravated assault with a weapon, etc., etc. What happens to white-collar criminals? Now, it would be perfect if a system that was designed to stop all crime had no way to address white-collar criminals, because that's kind of how it works now. If you do some kind of white-collar crime, you generally aren't going to do much time, and you're going to be out, and you are free to do everything that you did previously, provided that you don't get caught again. Couple interesting things happen here. This is like also the second like big investigation show of the whole season, because Babylon exists as well this season. But Psycho-Pass season 3, they also addressed like how a public officer could move on to a private company, and they mentioned specifically a golden parachute. Really interesting topics that we're tackling here. And because the guy that they're putting the screws on is a white-collar criminal, he's not going to have like any crime coefficient type thing, because he doesn't feel he's going to get caught. So they have to go and like allow the guilt to like fester. So they're gonna throw a little psychological dung bomb in there, so to speak, and they just walk out and they wait for the guilt to fester and for him to do something stupid so they can catch him. Very similar to old school police work, where you confront a criminal and then challenge them, and then they expose themselves somehow by trying to escape from you. Pretty cool themes that we're tackling here, pretty cool topics that they're choosing to deal with, because white collar crime is something that I feel like we haven't addressed with the civil system at all. Ooh, and we're talking about whistleblowers too. Psycho-Pass season 3, you've just like wormed your way into my heart. It hasn't even been 2 episodes worth of content yet. Okay, we'll talk about this. Oh snap, I thought this was some kind of deep state. No, it's the opposite. It's like the nexus of all private interests. Ooh, this is what they should have done for season 2. Probably. Because this is way more interesting than what they ended up doing for season 2 or for the movie. There's more. Ooh, end credit scene. Okay. Okay, Psycho Pass season 3 episode 1, double length opening episode. Actually really good. Actually really good. I wasn't expecting this at all. There's been a little bit of speculation that the show is going to be bad. That the writers are all the people who did season 2, but they also did season 1. Remember that. So far, they've played it pretty close to the chest. They've just had a single kind of case that they were investigating, and they were able to obtain a solution within one episode. It was kind of like an episode of CSI, but in the midst of that, we got these looks at the nexus of private power. We saw, of course, the human representation of the civil system. We saw a ton of stuff. We saw Tsunemori Akane, which is very important because if she's not in it, is it even Psycho Pass at this point? And she's doing some journalistic stuff. At the very end of the episode, it was revealed that the 2 inspectors that we saw, one of them being a foreigner, are people that she handpicked or is involved with in some way, which is obviously really cool because she's amazing. The show is actually good. The writing was consistently solid. There was no weird slip-ups of any kind. The evil characters are not fully evil. They were trying to cover up some kind of whistleblowing thing, which if you don't think people cover up whistleblowers, you should read maybe more news. If you want to get depressed, read the news. If not, just avoid it. That was a really cool angle to it as well, because whistleblowers have been a consistent theme of the past 20 years, I would say. Maybe 10 or 15 years. They're dealing with topics of immigration. They're dealing with topics of white-collar crime. They're dealing with topics of opening up an isolationist kind of country to exposure to the outside world, which is what Japan is going through to some degree right now. They're also dealing with drones, automation, these vehicles that drive themselves, with the cargo drone crashing at the very beginning. Could it have been crashed if there was a human? There would be a death toll of more than one. They would be reluctant to do that, maybe, we don't know. Obviously, there's everything else to do with Psycho Pass that we've always liked from the beginning, such as monitoring your own mental state of health, and it changing really fast, but then if it ever goes above a certain threshold, you just get permanent action at it. Psycho Pass season 3 episode 1. Consider me extremely impressed. Definitely gonna keep covering this show. Hopefully the fan subs come out faster. Maybe with more interest shown in the show, more fan sub sites will be willing to translate it. And I do hope it ends up picked up somewhere in the West, because visually I think it's very good. The 2D, everything looks really well done. The lighting in the backgrounds especially, I thought were pretty good. And the visualizations of the computers, they definitely are kind of more advanced than we've seen in the previous entries of the Psycho Pass franchise. That being said, some of the backgrounds I did take issue with, but that just might be because they're kind of low detail, kind of weirdly low poly backgrounds for 2019. I feel like in a couple of years that won't be a problem anymore either, because as I've mentioned, the CG in this season is some of the best CG we've ever seen, so I don't think that's going to be a problem too much moving forward. I don't know how closely this season is related to the movies. I have the first Psycho Pass, Sinners of the System, so after I watch that, preferably before the next episode of this airs, I'll tell you if it's just a rehash. I don't think so. There's only 3 hours of content there. We've already gotten how many ever episodes of this? I think there's only going to be 8 episodes of this, so it could just be a retread. That's what I was concerned about initially, but we'll find out. If so, I'm still fine with that because it's good stuff, and I'll take it however they want to give it to us. Production IG, good on you for actually following up in a season to the first Psycho Pass and expanding on the themes that you should have expanded on. Maybe it might be a little bit too investigation-y, kind of political for some people, I think, who enjoy the visceral nature of the crimes in the first Psycho Pass. That is I think an issue that they're gonna see, but overall I think a very solid done show. This season is so good, it makes me think that the next 1 year of anime is just gonna be complete crap. That's fine, because I'll still be watching anime from this season. There's legitimately maybe 6 or 7 shows you could be watching week to week, and they're all very good. Some of the best of the season, of the year, in fact. Psycho Pass Season 3, Episode 1. I'm sorry for being late in getting to it, but I eventually did get to it, and, they say better late than never, so... Whew. Okay, what an episode indeed. So, Episode 1, that's it. Episode 2 might be coming a week late, I think, because Episode 2, because this one was double length, or it could be that they combined Episode 0 and 1 together, because I saw Episode 0 floating around somewhere. But a very, very solid show, and actually expanding on the world that the first season set up. And maybe they just needed a little bit of time to consider what they would do if a second season were to happen without rushing the second season they ended up doing. Anyway, sorry for this video being so long. But that's it for this week of Psycho Pass Season 3. Come again next week, because I'm sure it's going to be just as good. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.